These women brought full Karen energy into the wilderness, where confidence turned out to be the least useful thing they packed. From a Karen chasing the perfect angle along a narrowing sandstone shelf, to a stubborn traveler who refused to wait for her group, took a long shortcut, and never made it back. Hey, appreciate you being here. This is Fatal Files. It was October 5th, 2019. A popular canyon trail in northern Arizona ended at a sandstone overlook where visitors gathered for photographs above the desert. The official viewpoint had a railing, level ground, and signs telling people to remain inside the marked area. Laurel Cates was 46 and worked as a wedding planner in Scottsdale. She was used to directing photographers, correcting staff, moving decorations, and asking people to step aside when they disrupted the picture she had planned. Friends described her as polished and capable, but also demanding when a crowd, delay, or rule prevented her from getting the exact result she wanted. Her social pages featured venue tours, table settings, weekend trips, and carefully arranged outdoor photographs where almost nothing appeared accidental. Laurel hiked with her adult niece, who carried the phone. The overlook was crowded, with families near the railing and hikers crossing through the background. Laurel checked each photo and asked her niece to try again from a lower angle. Her niece suggested waiting for the platform to clear. Laurel said they had waited long enough and pointed to a worn path curving around the barrier. A sign beside the path warned that the sandstone edge was unstable and visitors should stay behind the railing. Laurel looked beyond it and said other people had obviously used the shelf. You can really see the wedding planner in her here. The view was not matching the picture she had in mind, so she kept trying to make it work. She stepped around the barrier. The shelf looked broad near the entrance. Footprints marked the dust, and the canyon opened behind her. Her niece stayed inside the official area and took another group of pictures. A shrub blocked part of Laurel's legs in the next set of photos, so she told her niece to move farther left. That brought the railing back into the frame. Rather than change the angle again, Laurel stepped past the shrub and asked to see how the new pictures looked. Her niece lowered the phone and asked her to come back. Laurel motioned for her to keep shooting and said there was plenty of room. A hiker stopped and warned that the shelf narrowed ahead and loose sand covered the outer section. Laurel replied that she was not going farther and asked him to move because he had stepped into the background. That small reaction says a lot about where her attention was. The warning barely registered, but the background did. She turned one shoulder toward the camera and raised her arm. Her niece took several pictures, but Laurel wanted more of the drop visible below her and moved 1 foot backward. The sandstone sloped toward the edge. Fine sand covered the surface, with stones collected in shallow grooves. Her niece warned her again and said the last pictures were already good. Laurel asked for one final set before others reached the overlook. She placed her rear foot behind the other and shifted her weight. Her heel slid. Laurel dropped onto one knee and threw both hands forward. Her palms struck the sandstone, but loose sand moved beneath them. She tried to pull one leg underneath her, yet the sloping surface carried her sideways. Her niece ran toward the barrier, but a nearby hiker caught her by the backpack before she could step onto the shelf. Witnesses saw Laurel strike a lower shelf and continue down the rocky slope before she disappeared below the rim. Several hikers called emergency services while others moved her niece away from the edge. Rangers closed the overlook while a technical rescue team descended from a safer section of the rim. They reached Laurel on a ledge below and found severe injuries to her head and chest, along with multiple fractures. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The photographs on her niece's phone showed Laurel moving farther along the shelf with each new set. Investigators found disturbed sand, displaced stones, and scrape marks near the edge. The shelf had remained intact. The medical examiner determined that Laurel died from multiple blunt force injuries caused by the fall, and her death was recorded as accidental. The park later blocked the path, extended the railing, and added another warning sign at the overlook. She was chasing a better picture, but every step only made the situation worse. In western North Carolina, the next woman chose a closed shortcut and kept going until the trail beneath her was barely a trail at all. It was May 17, 2020. Several days of rain had soaked a mountain trail in western North Carolina where the official route remained open, but an older shortcut had been closed after part of the hillside gave way. Orange tape, a wooden barrier, and a warning sign blocked the entrance. Gretchen Danner was 53 and worked as a property management coordinator. Her job kept her dealing with contractors, access restrictions, repair schedules, and tenants asking for exceptions, so she was used to finding ways around delays. Co-workers described her as capable and efficient, but also quick to decide that a rule was being applied too strictly when it got in her way. She joined 2 co-workers for the hike and took charge of the route early. There's a big difference between being good at handling people and being good at judging unstable ground, and Gretchen was about to treat those like the same skill. The marked trail climbed through switchbacks, while a map on Gretchen's phone showed a direct path cutting across the slope and reconnecting higher up. At the junction, a notice warned that recent rain had washed out parts of the closed shortcut. Gretchen checked the older route on her phone, saw that the entrance still looked clear, and led her co-workers onto it before they could change her mind. The old path was easy to follow at first. Faded markers remained on trees, and footprints crossed the mud. Gretchen moved steadily, checking the map whenever the path bent away from where she expected it to go. Her co-workers followed until the trail narrowed beside a drop. One of them slipped on a wet root and caught a branch, so both decided to return to the marked trail. Before they separated, Gretchen showed them her location on the downloaded map and pointed out where she expected the shortcut to reconnect. Then she continued alone. I think this is where confidence can get lonely. The moment everyone else turns around, continuing starts to feel less like a route choice and more like proving a point. Farther ahead, slides had pushed branches and loose stone across the path. Through the trees, Gretchen could see hikers using the switchbacks below, making the shortcut feel safer. The route narrowed again near a washed-out section. Rain had removed the packed outer edge, leaving a strip of dark soil against the hillside. Gretchen tested it with one boot, turned sideways, and used exposed roots for balance. The first few steps held. Her right foot sank several inches. She shifted uphill, but the soil beneath both boots broke away. Gretchen slid down the slope and caught an exposed root with both hands. Loose dirt poured around her legs as she tried to pull herself back toward the path. The root began pulling out of the saturated ground, then tore free before she could reach another hold. She fell through brush, struck the side of a tree trunk, and rolled into the ravine. Her body hit several rocks before stopping beside a shallow stream. When Gretchen failed to appear at the connection point, her co-workers showed rescuers the route on her downloaded map. Teams searched from above and below, then followed disturbed soil and broken branches into the ravine. Gretchen was still conscious when rescuers reached her, but she could not stand and complained of severe pain through her pelvis, abdomen, and lower back. As they secured her in a rescue basket, she became pale, confused, and increasingly weak. The wet slope gave rescuers little room to work, and they had to raise the basket through loose soil and thick brush before reaching the main trail. Gretchen's condition continued to decline during the evacuation, and an ambulance took her directly to a hospital. Doctors found multiple pelvic fractures and major internal bleeding from damaged blood vessels. She was taken into emergency surgery, but died before the bleeding could be controlled. Investigators determined that the upper layer of soil had looked firm, while the ground beneath it remained saturated and unsupported. Gretchen's death was attributed to internal bleeding caused by the fall and was recorded as accidental. The shortcut was permanently closed, removed from updated trail maps, and left to return to natural vegetation. I understand wanting to save time, but a faster route means nothing if it takes away your safest option. Over a Colorado ridge, a woman refused to give up on the summit even as the trail began disappearing into the storm. It was August 8, 2022. A mountain trail in Colorado climbed above the tree line toward the summit, with no shelter along the upper ridge. Thunderstorms were expected before noon, so hikers planned to descend while the sky was clear. Celeste Haynes was 48 and had spent years raising her 2 children and running the household. She was heavily involved in neighborhood groups, where she liked people to see her as someone who followed through. Once Celeste told everyone she was going to do something, backing out became very difficult for her. You know, the type who takes a small challenge more personally than expected? She had a reputation for doing exactly that. For weeks, Celeste had talked about reaching a 14,000-foot summit. She posted training walks, shared the date with friends, and promised to upload a photo beside the summit sign. She joined 3 hikers from an online group. They planned to begin before sunrise, but Celeste arrived 40 minutes late. The others discussed postponing, yet she pushed to continue and said they could make up the time with shorter breaks. I have to admit, trying to fix a late start by rushing up a mountain is a little like fixing a missed alarm by driving faster. The lost time is already gone. Now you have another problem. The lower trail was calm, and Celeste kept the pace fast. At each stop, she checked the time and reminded everyone about her schedule. Near the upper basin, several hikers were already coming down. They pointed toward clouds behind the ridge and warned of thunder farther west. 2 members of Celeste's group turned around. Celeste continued with the group leader. The first thunder reached them before the exposed saddle. The leader called for an immediate turnaround, but Celeste pointed out that the summit was less than a mile away and refused to turn back. She continued uphill while the leader stayed behind, repeatedly calling for her to return. When hail started striking the rocks, the leader began descending while still calling for Celeste to follow. Celeste watched her leave, then continued toward the summit. Her phone contained a short video recorded on the ridge. Wind covered part of her voice, and cloud had hidden the route ahead. Minutes later, visibility dropped until nearby cairns appeared and disappeared inside the fog. She followed a line of stones that belonged to another descent. The path carried her away from the main trail and into a different basin. Her phone showed her close to the ridge, but steep rock bands stood between her and the marked route. She tried climbing back toward the crest, then turned downhill when lightning moved closer. Rain and melting hail soaked her clothes, and water ran into her boots. One text reached the group leader after Celeste's phone briefly connected. She said she had crossed into another basin and could no longer find the ridge, but she gave no landmarks that identified which basin she had entered. Celeste's pack held a light jacket, but no dry insulating layer. As the temperature dropped, she moved more slowly and repeatedly stopped behind rocks to escape the wind. Her wet clothes continued pulling heat from her body, while the hail-covered ground made every attempt to climb back toward the ridge more exhausting. Near dusk, Celeste tried to open an emergency blanket, but the wind pulled it away before she could secure it. She settled behind a low rock wall that blocked some of the wind, but offered no protection from the wet ground. Her group reported her missing at the trailhead. Rangers used the leader's last sighting, Celeste's message, and her direction of travel to identify several possible search areas, but lightning, fog, and darkness kept teams below the ridge overnight. After sunrise, ground teams entered the surrounding basins. One found the emergency blanket caught between rocks, then followed scattered belongings and faint tracks through the hail to a low rock wall. Celeste was found behind it with her phone and pack beside her. Investigators later recovered the storm video from her phone and concluded that wet clothing, strong wind, exhaustion, and prolonged exposure had caused fatal hypothermia. Sometimes finishing means reaching the top. That day, it should have meant knowing when to turn around. On a mountain trail in Washington, a woman grew tired of waiting at a marked crossing and decided to take a shortcut. What looked like an easy way across would soon put her in serious danger. Quick pause before the next story. I just want to say thanks for spending some time with Fatal Files. And if you're enjoying the channel, consider subscribing. It was June 28, 2019. A trail in Washington's North Cascades crossed a high basin where winter snow still covered streams beneath the surface. Rangers had marked a detour around one crossing because warm weather had weakened the snow bridges. Tabitha Klein was 51 and worked as an administrative services contractor. She noticed every delay, every extra step, and every minute somebody else seemed to be wasting. At work, she was known for cutting through slow procedures and pushing people to make decisions quickly. That same impatience followed her outside the office, especially when she believed the careful option was taking longer than it should. Let's see how that attitude works when she is on a mountain where she cannot rush the conditions. The hike had been suggested by one of Tabitha's neighbors, and she joined without taking charge. 4 friends drove together, stopped for breakfast, and spent most of the climb talking rather than watching the time. By late morning, they reached old snow above an alpine stream. Orange poles blocked the direct crossing and guided hikers uphill toward a rocky ford where the water divided into shallow channels. A family with young children was moving carefully through the ford, while another group waited behind them. Tabitha's friends joined the line. Tabitha stayed lower on the slope and looked across the snow beside the blocked route. Honestly, the wait was barely a wait, but watching everyone move carefully through the crossing was enough to make the marked route feel unreasonable to her. A row of fading footprints reached almost to the opposite bank. The surface was dirty, uneven, and covered with pine needles, but no open water was visible. You know that moment when a 2-minute wait starts feeling like a personal insult? Tabitha had found one. While everyone else watched the line ahead, she kept studying the tracks beside them. One friend told her the poles were there for a reason. Tabitha pressed her trekking pole against the snow near her boots. The surface resisted, and she stepped onto the first old footprint. Her friends were still close enough for her to turn back. Instead, she took one more step. A crack opened between the old tracks and spread across the snow. Then, the surface collapsed beneath her. Tabitha fell into fast meltwater, hidden several feet below the snow. The current knocked her sideways before she could raise her arms, carrying her beneath the surrounding snowpack. Her backpack caught against the edge, then slipped through after her. Her shoulder and part of her jacket appeared briefly in the opening, and someone tried to reach her with a trekking pole. The current pulled Tabitha into the covered channel before the pole could reach her. The group shouted to hikers at the ford and called emergency services. They marked the collapse point with a bright rain jacket, then moved back as cracks spread through the snow around the opening. Rangers and a swiftwater rescue team reached the basin with ropes, probes, helmets, and cutting tools. Entering beneath the snow was impossible, so rescuers worked from exposed rocks and opened access holes downstream. The channel curved beneath the snowfield, making it difficult to predict where the current had carried. Teams probed each opening while another rescuer watched the water. Nearly an hour after the collapse, a probe struck Tabitha's backpack. Submerged branches had trapped her beneath a thick section of snow several yards downstream. Rescuers widened the opening, secured themselves with ropes, and pulled her from the water. Tabitha had no pulse. They began CPR and warming efforts, but she could not be revived. The medical examiner found bruising from the collapse, but no injury that would have killed her immediately. Tabitha had drowned after the current carried her beneath the snow bridge and pinned her where she could not reach the surface. Rangers closed that section of trail for the rest of the snowmelt season. Crossed warning poles were placed over the old tracks, and new signs explained how running water can hollow out snow while leaving the top looking solid. After the earlier stories, this one feels different because Tabitha was given almost everything she needed to avoid it. She just decided she knew better. In the hills of Rizal, Philippines, an American tourist joined a tree planting activity she would never finish. It was July 21st, 2022. A reforestation site in Rizal, Philippines, sat in the hills beyond a popular waterfall area, reached by a steep trail through exposed grass and patches of forest. By early afternoon, the heat and humidity had made the exposed sections especially tiring. Delilah Ainsley was 54 and worked as an insurance adjuster in the United States. Most days, she inspected damaged homes and decided whether the claims matched what was actually there. After years of doing that, she had become very comfortable trusting her own judgment. You ever travel with someone who starts reviewing the vacation halfway through it? Feel like Delilah was that person? She was visiting the Philippines with friends and had spent the morning at a nearby waterfall. After lunch, they joined a local tree planting activity advertised as part of an environmental tour. The first section passed through trees, but the trail soon climbed into open grassland. Delilah began falling behind. She stopped several times, complained that nobody had mentioned how steep the hike would be, and asked why the seedlings could not have been planted somewhere easier to reach. The guide slowed the group and offered to carry hers. Delilah handed it over but kept going. By the time they reached the planting area, her shirt was soaked with sweat and her face was flushed. While everyone else collected tools, Delilah sat in the shade and said she was finished. She wanted to return to the vehicle. The guide told her they would all hike back together after the activity and asked her to rest until then. Delilah argued that she had already walked the trail once and could find her own way down. This is where Delilah's impatience really started working against her. She was hot, tired, and now treating another hour of waiting like something she should not have to put up with. Delilah left before the group finished planting. For the first several minutes, she followed the same trail downhill. At a bend above the forest, she noticed a narrow side path used by local workers. It descended much more directly toward the valley and appeared to reconnect near the road below. Delilah took it. The shortcut was steeper than the main trail and had almost no shade. Dry grass covered sections of loose dirt, and exposed roots crossed the slope. Delilah continued downward, stopping twice to drink from a small bottle she had carried from the planting site. Farther down, Delilah's pace became uneven, and she eventually stopped with one hand against a tree to drink before continuing. As the path narrowed along a steep hillside, she tried calling one of her friends, but the call would not connect. So she sent a short message saying she had taken another way down. The guide saw the message a few minutes later and called her. Delilah answered and said she could see buildings below and was almost back, but the guide told her to stop where she was and wait while he came down to find her. Delilah kept going anyway. Near the bottom of the hillside, the path crossed a patch of loose soil above a rocky drainage. Delilah stepped around an exposed root and lost her footing, catching herself against the slope for a moment before slipping again. She slid several feet, then tumbled down the incline, struck a tree trunk, and came to rest in the rocky drainage below. When Delilah stopped answering her phone, the guide and two participants followed the side path and found her about 20 minutes later. Delilah was unconscious and breathing irregularly. Emergency responders reached the drainage and carried her to an ambulance, but she died before reaching the hospital. The medical examination found severe head and chest injuries from the fall. Based on the heat, her limited water, and the weakness and unsteady movement reported before the accident, investigators concluded that exhaustion and heat likely contributed to her unsteady movement. The fall itself caused the fatal injuries. The planting organizers were not found responsible. Participants had been told to remain with the group, and Delilah had been specifically asked to wait for an escorted return. The side path she used was not part of the activity route. Her friends finished that day without planting Delilah's seedling. One of the local volunteers eventually planted it with the others. Sometimes being told to wait feels like somebody is wasting your time. Delilah learned too late that not every delay is a problem that needs fixing.